Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be going over some really useful sound design tricks in order to be able to get a very nice huge pluck sound out of just a sine wave to begin with. So this should help you out to understand sort of how I go about doing this a lot, because it is very easy, to be honest. It's mainly just some creative use of effects, and you could get something that sounds like this by default to actually be a really nice huge pluck. I did a similar video on this like a year ago, but since then I've learned some things. I figured an updated tutorial should get you some really cool results. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and get straight into this here. So right now I do have this bit of MIDI in this project. There's some chords, a bass line, and then what is going to be our pluck. Right now it's just a sine wave. I'm going to play it so you can hear it before we do anything to it. This simply sounds like this right now. That's all we got so far. So to begin, first things first, we're going to get this sounding big and plucky pretty much right away. The first step is to lower your decay and sustain, so you get an actual pluck, of course. I like to go for something very, very short, and this is intentional because I do end up bringing this sound to have almost all of its character from reverb followed by a big compressor, so that will fill up the space that disappears when you make it like this. You want to make sure it's on its own mixer track, because as I say, we are going to be doing some effects work to begin. And the very first thing I'm going to add is reverb. Now I'm in FL, I like using Fruity Reverb 2, the default reverb. I also have a different one I tend to use too. But overall, you can use anything you have, because reverb is just going to sound good for this pretty much regardless. So we want to up our decay a good amount, because this is going to be sort of like a background plucky element. And it sounds like this now. So I know that's very basic right now, don't worry, we're going to make that sound a lot better. But the next thing I'm going to add is actually an effect called Disperser. Don't worry if you don't own this plugin, this isn't 100% necessary, but I do love what this does to the sound, especially when we throw a compressor on afterwards. You could kind of hear it before. Adds like a very cool pinch to it. And following that, I'm going to add some compression. Now, I use a compressor called Gain Reduction. This is great for this sort of sound, but you could also achieve this with any normal old compressor if you just, crank it quite a bit, to be honest, because we're going to push this a lot. But that will sound like this now. Right, so as you can see, this is huge now. It takes up a lot of space. It's already, honestly, a really good pluck, but don't worry, we are nowhere near done yet. In Serum, I'm actually going to add a very quick sort of pitch down that happens at the beginning of every note by dragging an LFO to coarse pitch over here. And we make it go that way, and we're going to adjust the shape, set it on envelope as well, so that way it's going every time the note hits. Literally just make it look something like this. Very simple, but you'll hear right away what that does. So that's too much. That doesn't sound good. We want that in moderation. So if that doesn't sound good, I like to lower this a bit, so it's not doing that as much, but it still does exist. Sounds like this. That's much better. Wanted a little bit less, but now we're kind of good. Now the next thing I'm going to do is add oscillator B, and we're also going to make this a sine wave, except it's going to differ from this first one because it's going to be an octave higher, and we're going to add some voices of unison. This is going to give it a nice wide stereo top layer that merges in with it. But before we even hit play on that, we're going to drag this same LFO over here and do the same thing. Just in that way, both of them are following it. So now, this sounds like this. I like to lower the volume on the second one a bit. But now that there's more going into it, I think it's a bit overcompressed. We're going to reduce that a tiny bit. But now we could go into the effects section on Serum and start adding some cool things as well. So one thing I really like doing for this sort of sound is chorus. That's if we crank it all the way. Anything below 50 is usually good, and we can choose whether or not we want it to be low pass or high pass. Different tones, honestly. Do that so that way it's kind of doubling on that body of the sound. Thinking about this now, I'm also going to open up the noise oscillator and throw on some air cam that's key tracked. This will just give it some extra high-end content. I always like to do this and then bit crush it, because it gives it a very cool tone. but we don't want that to be the whole sound, so reduce it a bit, and then we'll probably EQ and clean up those harsh tops. And another really fun thing to add here is a delay. I like to go ping-pong mode, and just experiment with how fast we want it, because this could really like busy up your sound, but that's a good thing. We want that, because this is going to sound really cool in the background like that. Honestly, default's kind of doing it for me. I like it. If you wanted to, you could also go into this menu here. You just hit the little pencil icon near your wavetable. This is your wavetable editor for that oscillator. And we could go ahead and just draw in additional harmonics here if we wanted. This will make it sound quite a bit different, but I really like doing so. I'm thinking I'm going to do that on both. Kind of gives it a nice glassy tone, but it's really cool. And another tip I have for you, this one's really good. There's a plugin called Crystallize. I do not have it, unfortunately, but I end up doing this through Guitar Rig. It's pretty much the same way. I just move my ARP, like I tie it to another mixer channel. I keep it going to the master at the same time, so right now if I were to hit play, it's actually playing twice. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add a fully wet instance of Guitar Rig for it. Now, there is a nice preset in here that I tend to use. I just turn off all of the distortion that it adds. Otherwise, if you were to hit play on that right then, it would sound really loud and harsh, and we don't want that. But over here, this nice psych delay, I like to crank the mix all the way up because, as I say, we already have a dry instance, so we're good to do that. And on this mixer, we can fully control it with effects however we want. Turn it down a bit, and this is going to add a really nice crystallizer to that sound. So Guitar Rig actually opens with just like either left or right. It defaults to left, but if you click here, you get both. So you notice that was like really mono and weird, but now it'll sound very good and spacious. So you can adjust the timing however you want to. Cool, that's sounding good. So you see here, we've got this really nice pluck that's just out of a couple of sine waves and some creative use of effects. Listen to it in context with the rest of this pattern here. Right, I think that sounds really good. I hope this has helped you out, a little bit of sound design. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, be sure to drop a like and subscribe. But that's going to wrap us up. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.